Hi, it's Heather from Thicketworks, and today, in a continuation of the Secret Garden Diorama series, I'm going to show you one approach to creating garden walls for your diorama. This process is all about creating multiple layers. Before we get started, here are a few words about my online courses. If you enjoy the free content that you find here on my channel, but you'd like to dive deeper, consider joining us for Mixed Media for Beginners, Mixed Media 2, or the Online Image Transfer Workshop. There's a link in the description where you can view each class curriculum and decide whether or not these experiences are right for you. Okay, back to today's video. I'm concentrating on building the back wall to my garden diorama. So for that, I've cut a sheet of ReadiBoard that fits against the back wall of the diorama base. I'm using a charcoal pencil to mark the outline of the area that needs to have masonry effects applied, and I've already put a base coat of emulsion paint on this panel. I'm using the same stencil system that was created for the mini Gothic arch and stone walls tutorial. There's a link in the description to that tutorial so that you can grab your free SVG files, cut your own stencils, and build your own faux stone walls. I'm following this same procedure, creating section after section of faux stones against the surface of the ReadiBoard, and then interlocking the stencil with the existing pattern once the materials had a chance to dry, and adding the next section so that they work together seamlessly. Once the masonry is dried sufficiently on the first side, I flip the piece over and apply the same effects across the entirety of what will become the outer back wall of this diorama. Once the faux stonework is sufficiently dried, it's time to add mortar. And this is done using the exact same process that was detailed in the Weathering Miniature Bricks tutorial. At this point, I pause long enough to dry fit the components that will be placed against this wall, just to make certain that everything's looking good so far. And so far, so good. Time to continue with the process. Leaving these items in place, I use a dark wash of Acrylic Craft Paint to outline their positions on this back wall. They will be permanently affixed at a later point in the process, but for now I just need to know where they will lie against the stonework so that I can come in with a series of washes and create the kinds of effects that I'm looking for. I want this wall to appear as though it's ancient and quite weathered, so I'm beginning with a wash of very dark paint, mostly black with a hint of brown added. I'm adding streaking effects and using a sea sponge to help blend out the edges of these shadowy areas. Next, I'm filling in the area that will lie behind the standing fountain, just so there won't be any lighter colors that peek through. Once that first layer is complete, I'm flipping the piece over and adding this first pass of dark wash and streaking effects on the exterior wall. Doing my best to keep my wrist straight as I use the sponge to elongate the dripping effect. I flip the piece over again, and now I'm adding a rich brown, and again softening the effect with a sea sponge. Now it's time for a thin wash of very dark green. I'm picking out individual bricks and areas where it seems likely to me that moss and algae would have colonized this surface. I'm very carefully drying between layers with a heat tool ever mindful that foam core board is extremely heat sensitive. Doing another dry fit of the components, and then coming in with additional coloration in the form of a lighter brown and areas of darker, richer brown as well. At this point, it doesn't look very appealing, but I've had enough experience with these things that I know that as we continue to add layers like the dry brushing with a light cream color that you see me doing here, the layers will have a cumulative and almost magical effect in the long run. So it's important to get comfortable with this ugly stage. These materials and techniques are quite forgiving, so don't be afraid to experiment and create as many layers as you like. Now I've added a layer of mint green craft paint that has dried herbs mixed into it for a bit of texture. And once that's dry, I'm coming back in with the dark green wash and blending it out with a sea sponge to create a mottled, mossy effect. Now I'm adding a thinned layer of PVA glue specifically over the areas that have already been tinted green. And now I'm spooning a mixture of pulverized cilantro leaves over these areas of thinned PVA glue. I'll tap off the excess, revealing what looks like really stark and rather ugly areas of moss, but that will change as we continue to work on the piece. I saturate this dried cilantro with isopropyl alcohol and then come back in with thinned PVA glue over the top, and I blend that in with a crafting toothbrush. This will create an extremely secure and stable surface over the long run while maintaining that rich texture that the crushed herbs have provided. I carefully dry this layer with a heat tool, and now that the areas of moss are in place, we can compare them to the components that we'll be adding. I can see that a bit of darkness needs to be established at the base of the wall, so that will be the very next task, just to darken up any of the areas that will join. And now I can add moss to the trellis work, knowing exactly where it should appear in order for the trellises to look as though they've inhabited this environment for a very long time. If you'd like the resources and ideas about how to make these miniature roses and their trellises, watch the How to Make Miniature Roses tutorial. Okay, the time has come to fix these trellises in place. I'm piercing all the way through the foam core with a needle tool, and then using small pieces of wire that have been bent into a hairpin shape to push all the way through the foam and secure them into place. Then I flip the piece over and I can bend the ends of the wires so that they securely hold the trellis work against the wall. Now this does leave some ugly marks, but we'll be taking care of that in just a moment. For now, the main goal is accomplished, and that's to make sure that the trellises are firmly in place. Now I'm going to glue the fountain against the wall, and I'll be using 3-in-1 advanced craft glue for this operation. Now a dry fit against the base just to make certain that everything is properly located. I'll add some weight on top of the fountain, and while that adhesive cures, we can carry on by creating ivy vines. I've tinted some PVA glue with brown acrylic craft paint, and I'm dipping strands of jute twine into that goopy mixture. You can see why it's important to wear protective gloves for this. It is a sticky, gooey mess, but the results are so deliciously convincing that it is definitely worth the effort and the mess to get the results that you will love. I'm winding the strands of jute twine in and around all of the existing components, and I make a tiny bird's nest using the same material and tuck it up into the corner of the fountain. Okay, let's take a look by dry fitting and just make sure that everything is coming together properly. It looks great, so now it's time to begin adding the ivy leaves. If you would like to make your own ivy leaves, refer to the video on how to make miniature ivy vines. The whole point of creating the secret garden diorama is to be able to demonstrate a wide variety of techniques and methods that we can use in all of our miniature work. That's why you're hearing me refer to so many different videos. There are so many layers here and so many various techniques that it's impossible to include all of the details in a single video. Here you see me demonstrating the Popper's Bondo method, which is where you apply super glue and then instantly harden it with baking soda. I'm now using the same masonry mixture that was used to create the individual stones to add a faux stucco effect over the back of the exterior wall. Eventually, this wall will also be painted and given moss effects in addition to ivy vines, but for now we'll stick with the stucco. Now I'm joining this back wall with the base using 3-in-1 advanced craft glue. Now it's important to note that some kinds of foam core can react negatively to this type of adhesive. That's one of the reasons that I base coat all of my foam before attempting to attach it. Now that the back wall is in place, we can add more realism by adding a layer of soil to the join at the base of the wall where it meets the garden beds. And for this, I'm using PVA glue and dried used coffee grounds. I'll saturate those coffee grounds with isopropyl alcohol and then add thinned PVA over the top and allow it to soak in. Here I've created a kind of garden duff by grounding up lavender buds and sprinkling them over some PVA glue and affixing them at the bottom of the wall over the patio area. And yes, I have to admit I am happy with how this is turning out, but we have to marry the bottom of this beautiful fountain with the rest of the scene by adding a bit more moss. I'll be creating a peekaboo area behind the stone arch, so I've added a tiny length of paving and some faux grass on a small piece of Foamular project board on the other side of that wall. Here's a glimpse of the ivy vines before we added any of the ivy leaves. Now we can understand the power that all of these layers have created in this diorama. Extending the vines over the components, intertwining the roses with the ivy, and tying it all together with soil and garden trimmings at the base. Yes, this is definitely coming together. I can't wait to share the construction of the front wall and the installation of our miniature garden door. I'm also looking forward to sharing a few choice garden accessories for the final tableau. I've been waiting a long time for this moment. It's a real thrill to begin to see this come together. Thank you, as always, for being generous enough to spend your time with me today. I really hope that you've learned something that's of use to you in your own work. If you decide to experiment with any of these techniques or methods, I'd be thrilled to see your results. You can always post them on the Thicketworks Facebook page. Thank you again for hanging out with me. And until next time, bye.